Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.
It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. What follows is an interview with Glynn Turman. One of the first interviews we're releasing in 2021, and you know what? I'm just going to call it, might be the best one we do all year. It's not to say there aren't going to be a lot more great ones, at least that's our plan. It's just that Glynn Turman is that good. He's a legendary actor who's lived an extraordinary life. His first big role was at 12 years old in the original Broadway production of A Raisin in the Sun. He performed alongside Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, and Louis Gossett Jr. In 1975, he starred in the hugely influential film Cooley High, a classic if you haven't seen it. In 1978, he married Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin. I could go on. He played Mayor Clarence Royce on The Wire, Dr. Senator on the most recent season of Fargo, and now he's in the new film version of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is streaming on Netflix. Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is an adaptation of the August Wilson play of the same name. It focuses on the blues singer Ma Rainey, played by Viola Davis, her piano player Toledo, played by Turman, and Levy Green, her saxophone player, played by the late Chadwick Boseman in his final role. The story centers on a fateful recording session of Mother of the Blues by Ma Rainey in 1927 Chicago. Before we get into our interview with Glynn, let's listen to a clip. In this scene, the band is arguing over which version of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom to play as they wait for Ma to show up. And Toledo, Glynn's character, has just about had it with Levy's attitude and wants everyone to take the job more seriously.
It ain't just me, fool. I said everybody. What you think? I'm gonna solve the colored man's problem all by myself? I said we. You understand that? We. That's every living colored man in the world got to do his share, got to do his part. I ain't talking about what I'm gonna do, or you gonna do, or color, slow drag, anybody else. I'm talking about what all of us gonna do together. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, why don't you just say that then?
Glynn Turman, welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
When you're doing August Wilson, do you have to modulate what you're doing to match the language? The language is so extraordinary.
Well, yeah, the language is extraordinary, and you want to be true to it. You want to be true to the words, almost right down to the periods and the commas, But if you've had any vocal training, this is where it comes in handy, knowing breaths and pauses and so on and so forth. So yeah, August makes you use all of your technical skills.
Can you give me an example? Like, what's a line where?
Well, just what you just heard, what you're gonna do, what I'm gonna do. Talking about everybody, what everybody's gonna do. That whole soliloquy was a breath exercise, where you take the pause, how that pause comes up. So it's almost like playing a musical instrument,
You've been acting since you were 12 years old, but when you got your first part, which was in the original production of A Raisin in the Sun, it wasn't because you were a kid who aspired to be an actor. How did you end up going to the audition?
Well, it was because of the friendship between my mother, who was a single parent, she and I living in the West Village in the 50s, and she being friends with Lorraine Hansberry, who was, of course, another Black woman living in the same neighborhood. And so a friendship developed between those two, and it just so happened that Miss Hansberry had written this play, and that there was a part for a little boy, my mother said. And she said that Miss Hansberry wanted to know if you'd be interested in trying out for the part, auditioning. And I had no intention of being in a play, so my first question was, well, I'll do it if it doesn't interfere with my baseball game on Saturday. Will it interfere with the game? And my mother said, if you get this, it could very well interfere with your baseball game on Saturday. So,
It'll interfere with 2 baseball games on Sundays.
right. So, at any rate, I auditioned, and I didn't know what those other kids sitting in the hall waiting for, because I had read the play and I knew there was a role for just one little boy in it, and my understanding was that that was me. So what were these other guys doing, sitting out here waiting for, So it was a good thing I didn't know what an audition was, because I might have gotten nervous if I knew that we were all competing for the same role.
Was your mom like a super hip lady?
Yeah, she was a super hip lady. Yeah, she had super hip friends. James Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry. Jack Klugman, Brett Summers. All these people were her friends in the neighborhood of the village where I grew up.
Did your mom work?
She was a post office worker, actually. I remember helping her try to pass the test, remembering all the zip codes of Manhattan and having to pass that test. But that came afterwards. She, was a waitress at sometimes some of the restaurants that you may know about in the village back in the day. Any kind of jobs that could keep us in our humble apartment over on West 10th Street. So she did many different jobs, but she died working in the post office, which was working in the post office. You had a sense of stability. I was able to leave the play on Broadway, Raisin, which was bringing in a steady income, a steady check, which was a good check, and that kept us afloat until she was able to get on her feet with which she was aspiring to do. And then I left the play because I wasn't interested in following that path of a performer. I was interested in other things. And as a kid growing up in Manhattan, I was interested in, like I said, ball games, and I was interested in certain degrees of thuggery. So, but I kept getting these roles. After, of course, I did Raisin, I became the go-to black kid, whenever there was a part that needed a child of color. And so I ended up doing a lot of different things, working with David Susskind, who was a prolific producer of the time. A lot of the television was live television, and Playhouse 90 and stuff like that. So I ended up working with James Caan and Robert Redford in a piece called Black Monday that was about integrating the schools. And believe it or not, Redford and Caan were bad guys. They were good old redneck boys trying to keep us from integrating the schools. And I recently ran into James Caan and was able to mention that to him. And we were on a plane coming back from someplace not too long ago. And we had never met. And I introduced myself and said, "Do you remember that David Susskind piece that we did called Black Monday?" And it came to him right away. And he was, "Whoa, oh my God, yes, I remember that, And so we walked down memory lane on that. It was a lot of fun.
I mean, it occurred to me that given what a phenomenon A Raisin in the Sun was, almost immediately, it was nominated for a number of Tonys and so on and so forth.
Right.
Was the first African-American woman to have a play produced on Broadway. Right. And Lorraine Hansberry immediately became famous. She was still in her 20s, I think.
Yeah.
It must have been crazy to be a 12-year-old and I don't know who was stopping by backstage. For some reason, in my mind, yeah, it's like Don Newcomb or something like that. But that must have been bananas.
It was crazy. It was wonderful. And, the thing is, as a kid, you're not really easily impressed. But I knew from the reaction of my aunts and uncles and so on and so forth, the significance of who these people were. We had their records in their house. We had Lena Horne's records we played, in the house. Lena Horne would come by, Sarah Vaughan, would come by, Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of my favorite cats because Sidney kept in his dressing room a 45, a Colt 45 in the holster that he would practice drawing on. He would, draw, quick draw. And Sammy Davis, come to find out, was the fastest quick draw in the country at that time. And he had demonstrated these skills on the Ed Sullivan Show, a whole segment of him just doing all these fantastic tricks. Now, you know, back in the day when I was a kid, everybody wanted to be a cowboy. All kids wanted to be a cowboy, you know, and I was no different. And so when Sammy would come by, he'd come into Sidney's dressing room. I'd come in, ease in, and just kind of sit on the floor in a corner like a fly on the wall, as Sammy was teaching Sidney how to be a quick draw. And he'd do these remarkable tricks with this 45 and this black holster. And Sidney would try to copy the whole thing, and Sammy would say, "No, man, not like that. Let me show you." And he'd go into his thing. he'd pull the pistol out just as quick as lightning, and and then Sidney would try it, And then when they would leave, I'd still be in there, and I'd grab that that monstrous pistol off the wall and wrap the whole holster ring around my little body and try not to drop the gun, just trying to copy these guys. So, yeah, I had a chance to meet some of the most remarkable people in the business. Dorothy Dandridge, who was just gorgeous beyond belief, even as a 12-year-old, you can imagine what impression she made on me,
I like the idea that Sammy Davis Jr. upgraded himself from triple threat to quadruple threat with an actual threat, which is quick draw.
Right. No, he
was
if
you think it's just singing, dancing, and acting.
Yeah, and you're wrong. Right, exactly. He has something else for you, man.
But you didn't think that you wanted to be an actor. You went to PA, the famous performing arts high school in New York.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite by on a fluke, because luckily, thank God, a great teacher that I had in junior high school, Mr. Wilson, my wood shop teacher, the black teacher who knew that I had been on Broadway in A Raisin in the Sun. And he knew also that I was a chronic truant, mostly just skating by in my grades, just skating by enough to get promoted through the 3 years I was there. And when it came time to go to high school, he said, "So, Turman, where are you going to high school?" So I said, "I'm going to the High School of Aviation and Design. I want to be an aviations engineer." And he laughed. I said, "What's so funny?" He said, "Glenn," he says, you need to know math to become an aviation engineer, and you haven't been in a math class in 3 years, He said, you've cut class in my class for I don't know how many semesters. He says, "Why don't you try out for the High School of Performing Arts?" I said, "I never heard of it. What do they do?" He said, "Well, you've been in, the only time you do come to school, Turman, is to be in a play, one of the school plays." He says, "So they do plays at school, at the High School of Performing Arts." I said, "I'm not interested." I said, "I'm going to be an aviations engineer. I'm great with making models, doing model airplanes and model ships and so on and so forth." He says, "Okay, I'll tell you what." He says, "Take the test for aviation and take the audition for performing arts." Well, I did. And of course, I failed the test for aviation and I passed the audition for performing arts, and boom, there I was. And it was the first time I ever got an A in class, So when I got to that school, I never played a day of hooky again, I just loved it. Graduated top of the class,
Did you know about famous people who had gone to your high school?
Well, they give you a rundown of who those people were, when it first started and where it was. Eartha Kitt, I think, went to that school, and some other famous people, along the line. So yeah, they give you a whole history of it. It was quite a school because it was a small school, and what was great about it then, like the movie Fame, it was right smack dab in the middle of the Great White Way, Broadway. It was right on 46 and in between the 6th and 7th Avenue, so it was smack dab in the middle of show business.
Did you work when you were a young man? Because the kind of work that you were getting after you were in Raisin in the Sun was the kind where they say, "Hey, I know a kid who looks like the thing and can do a decent job." Mm-hmm. It's kid acting work. And that's
Yeah.
very different from the work that you get when you're 19. Like the work that you get when you're 15 is very different from the work you get when you're 19. Was it an easy or a difficult transition?
Let's put it this way. When I was, the 15 work came easily because, you were doing kids that were still in school age. I did a lot of, he was called Leroy Jones at the time, but changed his name to Amari Baraka. And I did his early works in off-Broadway houses and at the Actors Studio for Lee Strasberg at that time. And I was, 15 and doing the roles of 15-year-olds. But then I made the decision to become an actor after graduating, and I'm 19 now, and I'm 19, 20, and I'm married, and I've got a kid. And as soon as I made that declaration that I wanted to be an actor, and I'm 19 years old, I couldn't get arrested. Another role didn't come for a couple of years, And so I was struggling, being a struggling actor, running up to auditions and trying to feed a family, and getting fired from jobs because I would leave in the middle of the day to go for the sparse auditions that were there for black performers of my age category. So it was very rough making that transition. The thing that saved me was that I ended up at the Guthrie Theater as a journeyman. So there I had a steady job for a year. I moved everybody to Minneapolis and worked with Sir Tyrone Guthrie and Douglas Campbell and Lynn Carrier, Michael Moriarty at the Guthrie Theater for a year, Adolph Caesar. That was the first time I had stability as an actor in that age group.
I mean, I was thinking about when you're 12 years old and you're not the kind of kid actor, I think there's this kind of kid actor who's like a pageant contestant who can understand what the inflection of a line is supposed to be and is cute and can, kind of shine it on. That's a kind of actor who will, I think, they have a lot of growth to do to become an adult professional actor. But the way you describe your kid acting is because it was so accidental, it is like a lack of self-consciousness rather than extreme self-consciousness on stage. And in some ways, that's like what you aspire to as an adult professional actor.
You're absolutely right. Matter of fact, someone asked me just the other day, am I a better actor now or was I a better actor as a kid? I said, I was a better actor as a kid, I said, I'm just getting to where I was as a kid, in my craft. And it speaks to exactly what you're talking about here.
Sometimes I feel like acting training is so embarrassing. And when you're doing acting training, you do so much embarrassing stuff. Not because you're doing a bad job, although you probably are, but like, walking around the room like an elephant and going bee-ba boo-boo or whatever it is like totally embarrassing. And once in a while you'll hear like, this is ridiculous, this is embarrassing. And there's this part of me that wonders, is it so ridiculous and embarrassing because it is just like total ego destruction so that you can get to a point where you can invest yourself completely, fully, without artifice in something that is ridiculous, which is like pretending in front of other people?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Hey, let's just put it this way. I agree with you. I don't know if that's exactly what it is, if that's right or wrong, but I agree. I understand exactly what you're talking about. The other side of it is to call it certain freedom, freeing yourself up to be. And so you can call it that. It sounds better. But you can also just say, look at this ridiculous behavior. But it's just has just as much value, as calling yourself a ridiculous human being doing all these boo-ba things, so that you can do it in front of people. It's quite a craft. I've grown to just love it. I'm able to express myself through it, and hopefully people enjoy it.
You had a real career-changing and history of cinema-changing role in Cooley High in the mid-'70s. When you got that part, was it just another gig?
Well, It was a little more than just another gig. I had worked with Michael Schultz, the director. We'd done a play on Broadway. So he and I had a great working relationship, and he brought this project to me, and we were all kind of crafting it. He was crafting it with Eric Monte at the time, and they were just telling stories. Eric was building his stories, and I was kind of in on some of that process. And I knew Eric as well from the theater. So I was kind of invested early on in the process, which was I had never been before in the couple of 3, 4 movies that I had done prior to Cooley High. So I felt a little more attached to that project. And when we did indeed go into production, I was all in, just absolutely all in. So it was a little different in that respect.
It's an amazing movie. It's a really great movie if people haven't seen it. And it seems to me like one of the reasons that it is such an influential film, besides being good, and it's, one of the reasons you can see it in, the work of directors like Spike Lee and John Singleton, is that it has a little bit of melodrama to it, but it combines that melodrama with a really well-earned slice of life breeziness. And that is that's a very unusual tone. Most of the movie is kind of a wandering around buddies comedy, but at the same time, it is a very heavy movie. You must have been thinking about that as it was coming to be, as it was being developed.
No, not really. Wasn't thinking about that at all. I knew that the slices of life that it was taking were so familiar to me. The hiking on the back of buses to go from one place to the other in the city. I mean, that's what we did in Manhattan, in New York, during all these times that we were talking about earlier. Jumping the subway style to get to the train. That's how we lived, knowing the good guys and the bad guys and the jocks in the neighborhood. One of the things that made it different was that everybody, any movies that show you the bad guys, the dealers or the gangsters in the hood, is if they have no connection to the hood. Like there are separate people who doesn't know anyone else in the neighborhood who isn't a gangster. Well, that's not true. I knew all the gangsters in the neighborhood. All the gangsters in the neighborhood knew me, and we had
because you played Little League with them when you were 7.
Exactly, and that's the truth. Yeah, because you play Little League with those same guys.
Yeah.
So you have you know everybody. You know their parents. You know their brothers and sisters. You got to risk going to their house to pick up their sister that you're dating, you got to get them back. You got to get the date back because you know who the brother is, and that's what it exposed, that there was a community that everyone had a place and everybody knew one another's situation. So there was, I liked when the tragedy happened at the end, for the fellow who inflicted the fatal blow, how innocent he looked the moment after he realized what he had done. He all of a sudden, to me, I never get this picture out of my head of how it looks like that cool hat that was such a gangster hat on him all through the movie. All of a sudden, it looked like he was a kid in his daddy's hat. The hat was a little too big for him. I thought that was such a great metaphor for, the loss of innocence. So, the movie just struck home on so many levels, and some of it was intentional, but a lot of it was just playing the truth of who the people are and what that life was about.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a relatively tough neighborhood, and I feel like that one of the things that people don't always see from the outside is there are the same breadth of humanity in that kind of neighborhood, and that people see it in each other. It can change, but there's nerds.
Right.
There's nerds and jocks, and
right. Yeah.
I wasn't ever going to become a norteño because the kids that lived on my block knew that I was for one thing, super white, but also, they could tell I was a nerd. They could tell I was already on my way to becoming a public radio host.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
and that
Yeah,
was like,
yeah.
that was like a normal part of the neighborhood. Like, it's not like it was so crazy that someone was on a different track. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, it's like my thing. Some of the things that I wanted to do, which was, be a tough guy and run with a tough crowd, they wouldn't let me do because they knew I was going to be this actor guy. Oh, he's the actor. You can't do this, Glynn. No, you can't come with. I said, what are you talking about? But the neighborhood sort of helped guide me and, kind of looked out for me in terms of me being the kid who was supposed to do something else other than what was
Right.
going down with everybody else. You know what I'm saying?
When you were in Cooley High, I can't imagine that it was life-changing in terms of the amount of money that you got paid, because American International Pictures, I'm sure, was not writing giant checks to relatively unknown actors to be in their movies. But I can imagine that it changed your life in terms of walking down the street.
Yeah, to this day, to this day, I can't believe that there's 4 generations of people who recognize me as Preach from Cooley High. I've had young people come to me and say, my folks made me watch Cooley High. You're Preach from Cooley High. My folks put that on for me. It was the coolest movie. So yeah, I just finished filming in Chicago, and though the Cabrini Green community is no more, there are still remnants of people who lived in that community since it's been torn down, who are still in that area and who will come up to me and say, hey man, hey Preach, it's me. I was in the scene in Martha's candy store. I was in that scene. I did the house party scene with you. So it's an amazing feeling. So it's like I'm a folk hero kind of thing. I didn't become an international star, but I did become a folk hero in my community.
We've got even more with Glynn Turman still to come. Stay with us. It's Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR. This message comes from NPR sponsor Green Chef. Green Chef is a USDA-certified organic meal kit offering plans for every lifestyle, including paleo, plant-powered, keto, and balanced living. With their wide variety of high-quality, clean ingredients seasonally sourced for peak freshness, you can feel great about what you're eating and how it got to your table. Go to greenchef.com/bullseye90 and use code bullseye90 to get $90 off your first month, including free shipping.
Hi, I'm James, host of Minority Corner, which is a
podcast that's all about intersectionality. It's hosted by James with a guest host every week.
Discussing all sorts of wonderful issues, nerdy and political.
Pop culture.
Black, queer, feminism.
Race, sexuality.
News.
You're going to learn your history, their self-empowerment, and it's told by what feels like your best friend.
Why should someone listen to Minority Corner?
Why not?
Oh my God, free stuff. There's not free stuff.
The listeners of Minority Corner will enjoy some necessary LOLs, but mainly a look at what's happening in our world through a colorful lens.
People will get the perspective of marginalized communities.
I feel heard, I feel seen.
Like you said, you need to understand how to be more proactive in your community, and this is a great way to get started.
Join us every Friday on Max Fun or wherever you get your podcast.
Minority Corner,
because together
we're the majority.
Life Kit is rethinking New Year's resolutions. All this January, we're thinking about both really big and really small changes. If you're wanting to change up your life and start fresh, we've got you covered. If you're looking to just make your home a little nicer, we got you there too. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.
Welcome back to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. If you're just joining us, I'm talking with Glynn Turman. Glynn is an actor who's been in the game for over half a century. He's been in movies like Cooley High and Gremlins, TV shows like A Different World, Fargo, and The Wire. He's starring in the new movie Ma Rainey's Black Bottom opposite Viola Davis and the late Chadwick Boseman in his last ever film role. You can watch the movie now on Netflix. Let's get back into it. So one of the remarkable things about your personal life is that your second wife was Aretha Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question that I have about that is basically just like, how do you ask Aretha Franklin out on a date? Because you were married to her in the late 70s and early 80s, when she was definitely 100% already Aretha Franklin.
Right,
so like, what do you do? Like, how does that work? Like, I know you were already preached from Cooley High, but that's no Aretha Franklin. You know what I mean?
No, that's no Aretha Franklin at all. But it is what made Aretha Franklin a Glynn Turman fan. So I go with a friend, Ben Vereen, who was from high school performing arts. We were in the same class together. And he says,
I'm impressed, Glynn, that we had a whole conversation about high school, the performing arts, and how wild it was, and you know, you knew that Eartha Kitt went there when you were there, and so on and so forth. You were literally in the same class as Ben Vereen. Yeah.
We were buddies, and still are to this day. We're neighbors to this day.
Okay, so you're kicking it with your man Ben Vereen.
Yeah, so Ben and I are hanging, and he says, "What you doing tonight or tomorrow night or something?" I said, "Nothing much. What's going on?" He says, "I got a concert. I'm going to go to Armisen Theater tomorrow to perform for Jacqueline Onassis." So he says, "You want to come?" I said, "Sure, I'll go with you." So we go down.
All right. If you hold my feet to the fire.
Yeah. What the hell? So we go down to the theater, and he's in his dressing room. He's getting ready to do his thing, and I start wandering around the backstage, you know, and give him his space and time to get into his character and all that kind of stuff. And I wandered up these stairs, and halfway up the stairs, there's a kid at the top of the stairs, young fella, and he says, "Glynn Turman." I said, "Hello," you know. He says, "Oh my God," he said, "my mother just loves you." I said, "So who's your mother, kid?" He says, "Aretha Franklin, come with me." I said, "Aretha? Whoa, yeah." So
I'm familiar with her work.
Familiar. It sounds familiar. So he takes me up to her dressing room, over to her dressing room, and she's standing in front of the mirror, you know, and the lights are on, you know, around the vanity mirror, you know, huge, beautiful, with all these white flowers and roses, you know, flowers around the room, and she's standing in this beautiful white gown, and she sees me in the mirror, the reflection, and she let out a little scream, you know, "Oh!" you know, and I was like, "Yeah!" So, you know, so we introduced, and she, you know, "I love Cooley High," and blah, 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 blah. So we talk, and she says, you know, she just moved to California, and that she wanted to take some acting lessons. Well, I had been teaching acting for years at this point, and so I said, and I gave her that information. I said, "And if you want," I said, "come down and check out a class, see if you want to join it, blah, 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 blah." I said, so I gave her the address and the time and all that kind of stuff. And she says, "Okay, I'll get down there, you know." And so, you know, you say, "Yeah, right, you know, sure, she's gonna come to class. I believe that when I see it." Well, this particular evening, my whole class is over at the window looking downstairs, and there's all this hubbub going on. I say, "Hey, everybody, get back to your seats. What's going on? Get back. Let's we got, you know, work to do." And they said, "A limousine just pulled up downstairs, and there's a lady getting out with a fur coat on." So lo and behold, it was Aretha. She had come to the class, and you know, and the first thing I said to her was, "You're late," you know. And so she said, "I'm sorry," you know. And she came and took one or two or three more classes, but by that time we were already dating, and you know, the rest is history.
I once asked this guy I know, Matt Besser, who's one of the founders of improv and sketch group called the Upright Citizens Brigade, what it was like to have this one weird job that he had, which was at the very beginning of Kanye West's career, or, you know, not the very beginning of his career, but the very beginning of his fame, he was developing a show for HBO that was supposed to be kind of like Curb Your Enthusiasm, but a slice of life of Kanye West rather than a slice of life of Larry David.
Yeah.
And Matt Bessers got hired to be his improv coach. And I was like, well, what was it like, you know? Because obviously, you know, Kanye West is a brilliant artist. I don't know whether he's a good improviser, comedy improviser. And he was like, yeah, I mean, it was weird. It's like funny to think that into your acting class walks literally the greatest singer in the world.
Yeah, in the world. Yeah. Literally. You know, and the class
and
was
you have
like,
to be like, well, you're okay at this.
She was really good, but it wasn't her cup of tea for real. But we were already together when she got Blues Brothers, so I was her coach. You know, I had been working with her and continued to work with her for the production of Blues Brothers. Well, she did a very nice job.
She's great in Blues Brothers.
Yeah, she did a very nice job in Blues Brothers. So, the story I tell is that the question that you ask is a legitimate question. How do you, basically what you're saying is, how's a dude like you get hooked up with Aretha Franklin? You know, that's the question.
Well, anybody can fall in love. I don't question that anybody can fall in love. It's mostly how do you get up the gumption to ask the Queen of Soul out for dinner or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's how that happened. But the enormity of that dawned on me later. You know, the enormity, the gumption dawned on me later when one night I was, we were, it was late, like 2 or something in the morning, and I rolled over and she wasn't in the bed, and I kind of sat up and wondered where she was. And I kind of got up and I went down. I heard something downstairs, and I went. The closer I got, the more I realized it was music, and it had to have been her sitting at the Fender piano in the area where we kept that piano, and she was playing. And I kind of eased in, and there she was sitting at the piano playing. You know, she was in a house slippers and in a robe, and a cigarette dangling off her mouth, and just playing this music. And, people don't really give her the credit for the wonderful, wonderful musician that she was,
Yeah, wonderful pianist and organist.
Oh, what a pianist. So I just sat down like in the doorway of the entrance of that room and just had this private concert given by, it dawned on me, I said, that's Aretha Franklin. It's like you're hitting the palm of your hand against your forehead moment. It's like, oh my God, that's Aretha Franklin. And it's like I hear myself answer, yeah, dummy. How did you pull that off? It's like it's because she was amazing. It's really just an amazing person and musician.
So I'm going to fast forward through some pretty extraordinary screen credits that you have. I mean, I was looking at your IMDb page. You're like, oh, right. He was in Gremlins. Oh, look at that. He was on an episode of the new Twilight Zone that co-starred Danny Kaye.
Danny Kaye, yeah.
You have an extraordinary list of credits, but I'm going to fast forward to the greatest television show of all time, The Wire.
The Wire, yeah.
And my producer made fun of me for my goal of, doing this radio show in an attempt to interview every actor who ever appeared on The Wire. But when you joined the show and you played Mayor Royce on the show, the sort of like the machine-ish mayor of Baltimore.
Yeah.
Had you seen the show when you went into the audition?
I think I'd watched an episode or so, and I didn't audition. It was a role that I got while I was doing another project, and it was offered to me through I had a wonderful manager at that time, Hilly Elkins. So I had heard more of the show than I had seen it, but I never really tuned into it and got into it until I ended up on it, and then I was just hooked once I started reading and seeing the scripts that came down the pike.
What can we expect the last week of my re-election campaign?
Sir, I did what you asked. No more, no less.
Amsterdam. Legalized drug zone?
Well, he takes responsibility for that.
Subpoenas all over town.
That, too.
Then the leak about the witness murder. I mean, that was his shop, too, right?
Hell yeah.
And now, this last thing, transferring detectives off the case. What is that? What is that?
Scuttling the investigation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's awful. Jesus.
Mr. Mayor, you asked me to slow that investigation down.
Subtle, Irving. You hold a few facts for a few weeks. You put a report or two in a desk drawer. But the transferring of people off a case?
Look, you told me you specifically wanted me to not...
Irving, you may leave.
Mr. Mayor...
That will be all, Commissioner.
Were there people that you were thinking of? I worked for a minute in the mayor's office of Willie Brown in San Francisco. And Willie Brown was a much more kind of playful figure than Mayor Royce is.
Yeah, no,
but he had the same, had and has, you know, he's like in his 80s now, had and has the same kind of like, you look in his eyes and you know he always has everything schemed out 4 steps ahead. You know what I mean?
Right.
Were you thinking of anybody like that?
Well, I got a chance to meet the man it was crafted after, which was Mayor Smoke, who was the mayor of Baltimore at that time, when we did the Amsterdam thing about the legal drug zone. You know, that was Mayor Smoke's idea. And as a matter of fact, he was even in one of the episodes that addressed that whole thing. So I got a chance to see his temperament and his pace of things. And it was interesting that that whole take of Amsterdam, he said, I would have been a hero. He says, all I had to do was change the phrasing of what I was putting out there, what was being put out there. He says that would have made me a hero instead of costing me another term. He says, all I had to do was phrase it as a health zone instead of a drug zone, you know? He said, if I could have phrased it, if I had phrased it as a place where you could go to get well, I would have been a big hero. You know, and he's right.
I want to return for a moment to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. One of your co-stars in the film was Chadwick Boseman. Did you know that he was ill when you were making the movie?
No one had a clue. No one had a clue. I think the only one who knew probably was Todd Black, our producer. But I don't think Denzel knew. Todd would have known because he had to handle the insurance situations and all that kind of stuff. So he probably knew. But none of the creative ends knew.
What was it like to process that information and know that you didn't know?
Well, it just, you know, you could feel the puzzle pieces starting to click into place, you know, on afterthought, you know. You say, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's why those people that were there. Oh, that's who those people really were. You know, I thought he was a bodyguard, and actually he was a physical therapist, you know. Oh, that's why, you know, such and such and such and such a thing happened, you know. And on the other hand, you'd say, wait a minute, how in the hell could he be that sick and be on, you know, those powerful medicines and have the energy to do take after take after take of these strenuous scenes that we were doing? You know, who in the hell was this guy really? You know, maybe he was the Black Panther, you know, because he was doing superhuman, you know. So it just brought in a lot of questions, answered a lot of questions, and posed a lot of other questions.
You can tell me if this is too broad of a thought or too big of a thought, but there's a part of me that wonders if being that aware of one's expiration date gives you permission to have that kind of freedom that you were talking about earlier as a performer.
I don't know, because I don't want to cut short the notion that he was as brilliant as he was, regardless of what his condition was.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want anyone to get the opinion that, oh, he only did this because of that. He was that crafted and that gifted an artist that I'd rather believe that he was going to turn in that performance anyway.
Yeah, I believe that. Do you have ambitions for your career, particular ambitions for your career, now that you've done the first 60 years?
Well, I call this the back nine of my career, and the back nine is going rather well. Of course, I've still got pet projects that some I've pulled out of the trunk, and I would like to see done before I, play the 19th hole. But then again, there's some new projects that have come to me to try to do, or that I'd like to do as well. So yeah, I'm still in the game. I'm still in the game. I still enjoy it. Still love it. Trying to get better at it, and I just keep on keeping on.
Well, Glynn Turman, I wish we had another 4 hours so we could get to your ABC After School special and your episode of Manimal. But I appreciate you taking this time. It was really nice to get to talk to you.
Good to talk with you too, my brother. I appreciate it, and look forward to rapping with you some more.
Glynn Turman, what a guy. His movie Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is streaming right now on Netflix. Go check that out. He's got so many other wonderful performances as well. Watch him in Cooley High if you haven't seen that already. And I mean, I hate to be that guy at the party, but if you haven't watched The Wire, you should watch The Wire. That's the end of another episode of Bullseye. Bullseye is created from the homes of me and the staff of Maximum Fun in and around greater Los Angeles, California, where you might even be able to hear the rain coming down on the windows of my home office here. Certainly my dog Sissy has heard that rain, and she is curled up on my lap right now. Our show is produced by Speaking Into Microphones. Our producer is Kevin Ferguson. Jesus Ambrosio and Jordan Cowling are our associate producers. We get help from Casey O'Brien and Kristen Bennett. Our interstitial music is by Dan Wally, also known as DJ W. Our theme song is by the Go Team. Thanks to them and to their label, Memphis Industries. If you want to hear the latest about what we're up to, you can keep up with the show on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We post all our interviews there. And I think that's about it. Just remember, all great radio hosts have a signature sign-off. Okay, Sissy, finished.
Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.